Well, welcome to day 2 of WPC. I know it's early. It's always fun to have the 9 a.m. slot after day 1. I know many of you enjoyed yourselves last night, as I did. But today we've got another action-packed day for you. How many of you guys, this is your first WPC? Okay, well, good. Well, thanks for making the investment in time and resources to come. We greatly appreciate it. By way of introduction, my name is Brent Combest. I am a member of the Worldwide Partner Group, and my area of expertise and where my team focuses their time is around partner profitability. And complementary to that, we also look after the Cloud Solution Provider Program from a partner strategy standpoint. We look after our competitive recruitment efforts and our Azure practice development around the world from a business development perspective. I recently joined that team. I spent 3 years prior to that actually working in the SMB space for Thomas Hansen's team, leading our cloud sales and strategy. So think about the days of BPOS to where we are today. That was where I spent most of my time, was helping to grow that piece of the business. The part of my job that I enjoy the most is actually getting to spend with partners, traveling around the world, hearing their stories. And as part of that, I've heard the good, I've heard the bad, and I've heard the ugly. And that's helped me to formulate a lot of insights on how partners are building their business for success. And that's really what I'm going to do today, is talk about some of those best practices, also share with you some of the insights that we've learned through some research that we've recently completed, and then put that in context of how you can build a multi-workload strategy. You know, when I was starting that role in the SMB team a few years back, it was all about Office 365, and that was the beginning of our journey, and that's where partners started to build their practice. But the partners that have been hyper-successful with the cloud over that period of time have now started to branch out and take more of what we call a multi-workload approach. And as a result, their profitability and growth has soared from that. And what I'm going to do is kind of fuse those pieces together and show you through a kind of a customer example, a mathematical equation of how your revenue can grow, and give you some context into what those partners are charging for their managed services and project services and things around that, so you can see how these pieces really come together well. Now, I think it's important, though, to simplify my observations. And as I've gone through and spent time with partners, the successful ones really do 4 things very, very well. And you can see them listed here, and I'm going to go through each one of them with some context. And the first one is all around developing focus and building efficiency into their business, right? One of the biggest challenges I've seen in the channel, and I did start my career there, by the way. The first third of my career was spent working for Dynamics Partners before I came to Microsoft about 10 years ago. And this was a problem that we had as well, was we were opportunistic. Right? Today we'd sell to a hospital, tomorrow we'd sell to a pro sports franchise, and the day after that a hotel or hospitality firm. And it caused us to have to be a jack of all trades and efficient at nothing. And that was a key learning for us. And we did transform our business years ago in the dynamic space to be very razor focused on a vertical, and we saw some really interesting things happen as a benefit. But as you create that focus, then it becomes about, how do I create hyperscale? If I'm monetizing an annuity stream, which is where the real profit is at, that's what has to be embedded as part of your core DNA, is attracting and acquiring customers at a faster rate. And then once I have those customers onboarded, how do I gain that wallet share? How do I increase my value to them and monetize new things so that my lifetime value dramatically rolls up and increases over time? And then once I have that value embedded in them, how am I finding ways to create stickiness so that they'll never leave me? And so I'm going to bring together a bunch of best practices into a cohesive story around these 4 pillars for us today. But let's actually start with developing focus. And I'll share some stories with you as well as we go along. And focus means a number of different things. I've seen focus in the form of verticalization. I've seen focus in the form of building a very specific technology-based solution and selling it over and over again in a very consistent way. And focus, you know, there's a number of ways that you can find your way into it. You can do what we call falling back into it, which means you acquire 2 or 3 customers that have common needs, or maybe in a common scenario like a vertical, like law firms, for example, and all of a sudden you've built up a domain expertise that you can start to replicate and sell with more efficiency. That's number one. Another is, let me pause there. Let me actually give you an example of one. There's a company that I've talked about many times that is based locally here in Tampa, Florida. Their name is ForceWorks. Has anybody ever heard me tell the story of ForceWorks in the past? You can best guess by their name that they've come over from Salesforce.com to join us. They sell CRM Online and Office 365 for us. And they've been at it for about 3.5 years. And they started out selling opportunistically, but they gained inertia around law firms. And as part of that, they actually built a relationship with the Florida State Bar Association. That's the governing body of all the attorneys here locally. And when they did that, they became the only accredited provider of Office 365 to those entities. And now, as a result of that, they can charge whatever they want within reason. So on top of having a top-line revenue benefit, selling the same thing over and over again has made them incredibly efficient at their marketing and at their sales and at their delivery practice so they can acquire customers at a faster rate. He's been so successful with this that he's actually going to the second scenario of developing focus, which is seeing an opportunity. He sees a lot of the common use cases that are in his legal firms being the same inside of community banks. And so he's building a vertical around community banks, building a finished product there as well, and now going out and working with those particular entities and building his second vertical. So once he's mastered one and has an inertia around it, he goes on to the next one and will build his business over time. But what I think you guys can take away today is what I think is a good recommendation is to look for density in your install base. One of the things I often do when I sit down with a partner is I say, let's take a look at your client roster. And we go through that from top to bottom and we look for density in a 4-digit SIC code. Where do you have a lot of vertical orientation that maybe you're just not aware of? Maybe it's a latent focus that you're not keenly observing today. And as part of that, we also go out and we interview the sellers and the billable staff of those partners to say, where are your skill sets at? Where do you feel most comfortable and confident in talking to customers? And where do you have the best set of experience? And you'll find a lot of times that there's a density of experience in one or two particular areas there as well. And that's a simple exercise that can be done. And that was one of the things that we did in my old partner business, and it turned out that we had expertise in professional sports franchises and the sports and entertainment industry. And so we went after that pretty aggressively. Now beyond focus, the clicker's a little soft today, batteries must be getting dead. Once we build that focus and we have that identity of what we're going to do, and the thing I love about focus as well, it doesn't matter if you're making cupcakes or if you're selling technology, having discipline in your business about what you do and your core competencies will create efficiency. And once you have that knowledge and understanding of where you're going to focus, that'll translate into your ability to create scale. And the way I think about scale is a connected supply chain. I think of it almost like a factory, right? And it starts with investing adequately in marketing and investing in the right ways. Most partners today, think about your P&L if you're the owner of the business. What percentage of your revenue did you invest in variable marketing last year, the demand generation? Take the head count out for just a minute. Most partners, it's 1% to 2% of their gross revenues go back into driving demand. The partners that are at the top of our list in terms of cloud success are investing 7% to 8% of their P&L back into marketing. And the reason that they're doing this is they realize that the real profit is in the annuity stream revenue of managed services and packaged IP. And that's actually a good point to pause on. When I look at the ways that partners create monetization, there's 4 ways that they do it. They do it through product revenue. So think about selling Office 365 and gaining the margin or the channel incentives from that. That'll garner about 20 points on the high end of margin, gross margin for your business. Depends on exactly what licensing program you're in, but the cap for that's about 20 points in most cases. The project services side, that's going to be about 35 to 40 points of margin. I'll talk later on about why that is. Managed services, you're going to see 45 to 50 points. And packaged IP, you'll hear me say a lot of times, this is where the real kings of the cloud are. That's oftentimes 65 points of gross margin and higher. And those last two that I mentioned, managed services and IP, they're recurring revenue. This has been the secret to where partners have been creating explosive growth of 40, 50, 60, 70 points of growth every single year. And what goes right along with it oftentimes is a higher EBITDA because of the particular gross margins associated to that. But it all starts with marketing and making sure that you can build that annuity stream up. So you've got to invest properly. And when you do invest, there's a new way about investing. You know, the old interrupt marketing schemes of direct mail, teleprospecting, and email really, they don't work as well as they used to, certainly direct mail. Email a little bit, you could argue on certain markets with teleprospecting. But for me, I don't know about you guys, I haven't answered my phone from a phone number that I don't recognize in years. I don't read email unless I know who it's coming from. And my mailbox team in Redmond absolutely hates me because I never check that mailbox, right? It's huge when I go in there every 6 months to look at it. So the way that I do things is I look for digital marketing, right? I'm looking for really two skill sets in the partner's business. One is the technical ability to amplify your page rank, and that's a unique skill set, and it's ever evolving. So I actually recommend for most partners to outsource that to a firm that specializes in it. But where I do recommend an internal potential for investment is in the concept of content marketing, right? Making your message on your website very unique and providing assets that will help a prospect to self-educate themselves. That term of self-education is both wanted by the prospects, right? IDC is about to publish some data that says McKinsey's just recently published some data that said 65% of the buy cycle happens on the customer's own accord through their own research before they ever talk to you. So if you don't have the assets on your website that can self-educate them, they'll find it somewhere else. And those assets on your site can be developed in a number of different ways, right? These are blogs, these are case studies, these are videos. And we all have become schizophrenic in our attention span. So what I generally recommend is a blog is no more than 1,000 words, a video is no longer than 5 minutes, a case study is no longer than a page. Right? That's, you want that quick hit information out there. You've even seen Microsoft kind of go that way now. Everything that's coming out is very kind of social oriented and can be consumed really, really quickly. So that marketing piece is a trade that we've got to get really good at. But as we get that marketing engine humming and we're starting to create leads, we've got to think about how do we capture and acquire these customers at a rapid rate, but do so that's in a cost-effective manner. Now think about your own P&Ls as well today. I would bet that if you took your quota for your average seller and divided their loaded costs, salary, benefits, commissions, you're probably in the range of about 20%. Most of the partners have realized that because of the way the annuity model works and the consumption of cash flow works, you need to lower this to maintain profitability. These partners are looking for a rate around 10 to 12% in terms of the direct sales cost rate, and partners have now been so successful at it that they've come down to 7 to 8%. And there's different ways you can do this, right? If you're vertically oriented or specialized in your business, you can accelerate your sales motion, close more deals, and that will drive up quota. That's one way. The other is to lower the cost barrier for this, and we have many partners that have now started to embark on this phenomenon of hiring younger sellers. You've probably heard me talk about Perspicuity, which is a UK-based partner. They hire 16 to 18-year-old kids to come in, and these kids do 50 deals per month. They have no cloud bias. They say the same thing over and over, and they go right through the deals in a hurry. That's an SMB example. Blue Rooster, on the other hand, who is a corporate accounts EPG SharePoint partner, completely flipped their business about 18 months ago, stopped doing, for the most part, project services, and now have built something they call Rise Foundation, which is a tool that allows them to build corporate intranets very, very quickly in almost a PowerPoint. The same way you move visuals around in PowerPoint, you can now do that in SharePoint with their tool. And it's $6 per user per month, and they fired their entire sales staff. I don't recommend doing that. I'll explain why in a minute. They fired their entire sales staff, backfilled them with kids that are fresh out of college that have business degrees, that can talk business. And these 24-year-old kids sell exclusively, almost exclusively, 95% over the phone to companies like Boeing and Nordstrom. Right? So this myth of I've got to go out and spend time in front of this customer to show off my stuff and let them touch and feel all this stuff, that's kind of going away. Now, there are a few markets around the world and emerging that are still a little bit different, but by and large, the sales motion has shifted to that basis, and that allows them to close a lot of deals really fast. They did 100,000 seats last year. They'll do 500,000 this year. 15 people in that company. So it's not a big mammoth entity like a CDW. This is somebody that can create hyperscale quickly. And then the last piece is around the actual delivery, right? So if I'm selling Office 365, I want to get that customer to time to value immediately as fast as I can, because that will get them to sink their teeth into the cloud and want to make them consume more. And so I highly recommend, if you're not using one of these automated utilities like a BitTitan or a Skykick, that you investigate doing so. The partners that I had worked with that were not using it, using instead human labor to deploy Office 365, were seeing a very poor gross margin on services, 30 to 32 points. With Skykick, it's 45 to 50 points, right? So it becomes a profitable endeavor. So they're on the floor, so is BitTitan. They're on the expo floor this week, so be sure and investigate and take time with them. But now once you build that scale and you acquire these customers, it becomes about growing them over time, right? And taking that next step in the evolution of their life cycle with you, almost painting a yellow brick road of how they'll go from point A to point Z in the cloud with you long term. And so there's a couple things that have to happen here. One is we need to think about a nurture marketing strategy. And our partner out of South Carolina, Palmetto, is phenomenal at this. They've got a very rich nurture engine where on a regular basis they're engaging with their customers to educate them on the value of what they actually have in front of them. They may start with email workload, but here's what old habits, Skype for Business and OneDrive and all these other tools can do for you in order to expand the footprint. And then also, let's start talking about CRM Online. Let's talk about these other pieces. And over time, they build that relationship with them. And they also create a business plan with that end customer as well, so that they're painting that vision for long-term, the value that they can provide to them. Just a note, Mr. AV, we probably need some new batteries for the next presenter. Now, in terms of increasing value, this is where it starts to get interesting for me. And I actually, when I was building this presentation, I kind of put it in my mind, what would I do if I left Microsoft and went back out into the channel? And how would I build my business long term? And there were some interesting things that I see happening in the channel today of people stitching together the technologies. And this is why I love partnering with Microsoft, is there's no other vendor that can provide this breadth of opportunity of monetization for our channel today and value for our customers as well. But I would start with that Office 365 workload, get the email going, and then I'd start to branch out from there. My next logical step would be connecting them through EMS and looking at Intune and starting to manage those devices on their behalf and outsource the non-essential things. A quick little adjunct story, if you haven't figured it out by yet, I like to tell stories. My brother-in-law, this is personal to me, we got them into the cloud a while back. And he's the IT director for a company in Seattle that sells all the dishes and all the food supply services to hotels and restaurants. And he spent 80% of his time managing the Exchange server. That's not what he wanted to do. That's not what any IT director really wants to do. They want to do the cool stuff. And so when they moved into the cloud, they moved more and more progressively there. They started to outsource some of the things that weren't core to their competency. And it allowed him to focus instead on doing really interesting things. Like he built an application that connects CRM to ERP inventory data for their sellers, so real time on their phone they can produce quotes, send it to the prospect on site with them, and close the deal immediately and dramatically shorten the sales cycle, as opposed to, let me go back to the office, send you a proposal, follow up with you 5 times before you answer your phone. And it made him a hero inside of that business, right? The CEO and CFO absolutely loved that the IT guy is now contributing to driving revenue as opposed to keeping the lights on. So this is the kind of vision that when you're sitting down with IT, a lot of times you can paint that vision as to why, hey, you should take your IT activities that are run rate type activities and outsource them. Most partners are also pitching this as a way for them to provide a cost-based savings to their end customers. And that can be done through EMS. But where I think it starts to get interesting, where my ears start to really peak up, is what can we do with CRM Online? And what can we do with even potentially our ERP offerings in the cloud down the road if you wanted to go that far? Because to me, when I can capture that customer and financial data in the cloud, I can do amazing things with it. And I'll give you a couple of real quick examples of this. These are not Microsoft partners, but these are companies that are doing this that we're modeling after, and I'm seeing some partners start to march down this path towards replicating. One is a company called VivoNet. Anybody heard of VivoNet? I ask this everywhere. Nobody's ever heard of them. I'm surprised. They are a company that sells point-of-sale and financial applications in the cloud to restaurants. And what they do, because it's in the cloud, they take all that data from the financial and point-of-sale system and aggregate it into the cloud and then anonymously sell that back as part of their managed service to the customers, to the restaurants. And now the restaurants have the power because they can see what their peers are paying for food and beverage and alcohol and supplies, and the distributors are now on the heels because the restaurants actually have the power. Same thing can be done here once you have that orientation and can provide that specialized value. DealerSocket. I actually worked with these guys when I was in the channel. I went to Microsoft. They went and started a company. They are a CRM online provider or CRM cloud provider for automotive dealerships. They have 31% of the cars in the U.S. that are sold go through their CRM system. So not only can they sell that benchmarking data back, but they can identify, hey, you're the worst performing Mercedes-Benz dealership on the East Coast for service bay utilization. For $300 an hour, I can consult with you and I can fix that. So they're monetizing their product, their IP as far as the data, the benchmarking, and then business consulting. That is a highly profitable endeavor for them. So that's kind of where we think folks are going. Now, I painted this picture already. I got a little ahead of myself, but you can see here why not all revenue streams are created equal. And these are the gross margin rates that we typically see by revenue line today through our research. Okay? You guys take a couple pictures of that, but I've already talk to that and then I'll move on. The last two, as a reminder, are the recurring streams that will produce not only the profit for you, but a higher rate of growth. Okay? All right. Now, we also just completed a ton of survey work. I was actually really impressed with the amount of partners that came back on this, so thank you if you were a respondent to this. We deeply engaged with 66 partners and spent a lot of time with them, but we surveyed 1,200 partners to understand what were they actually monetizing in the cloud around our offerings. And these are the top managed services that came back. And to me, there's nice news for me, is there really wasn't that much of a surprise, but what I really like is the middle circle that you see there, is this monetization of desktop and device management as a service. And why I say that is, if I think about Office 365, your average partner today gets about $5 per user per month to manage Office 365 as a managed service. That's a global figure. It varies in certain markets. But what they're getting for EMS and to manage the device is generally 10 times that. And so as you think about your strategy, start with Office 365. That's the locomotive that all the other payloads will connect to, but then quickly branch out into that EMS space or that Intune space and start to take control of managing that help desk environment for your customer. That'll be a key piece. So let's actually put this into practice. I came and built a fictitious customer, and I said, let's look at if we did string these things together in the right way, what would it mean to our P&L, right, in terms of top-line revenue for the business? And so I'm going to walk through a use case here of a company that's growing fast. They've got 50 productivity users, and they also, on top of moving into Office 365, they want to move a line of business app into the cloud on Azure through our virtual machine. So I'll take you through this step by step. So again, with Office 365, it's a 50-seat deployment. You can see here that the product versus project services and managed services ratio aligns to what I mentioned before. So Office 365, I use the business premium SKU here for $12.50 per user per month. On average, we see to deploy Office 365, between $100 and $125 is the going rate in most cases to do this. Now, some partners are as aggressive as they give this away, and I've seen the other end of the spectrum where some partners charge much higher for this. It really is variable, but as a general average, this is what we see today. And as a rule, a product like Skykick is generally, depends on the volume that you do, but about $50 per user to push that through. So you can actually see a reasonable margin there based on that. You've got to add in your labor cost, which is minimal on top of it. And again, I already mentioned that the managed service per month around Office 365 is $5 per user per month on a global average. So what you can see here over a 5-year window, and I do everything over a 5-year window, you should do for your modeling much longer than that. Our churn rates today, if you do the math around it, actually show that the customer life cycle will be much longer than that, but I do it to be conservative. So 5 years, my gross revenue is going to be almost $59,000 in total, but my net revenue is going to be only about $16,000, and that's because this particular offering is predominantly product and project services. It's not real heavy in the managed services yet. And I'll explain here in a minute as we move into EMS and into the Intune space how that ramps up very quickly. But I also wanted to pause as we go through this and share with you a couple of metrics that you can measure inside of your business as well. And when I think about project services, this is my particular favorite metric. It's this concept of billable markup rate. Anybody use billable markup rate as a way to manage your business today? It's an efficient measure to determine the contribution to net income of each one of your billable resources. And so if I think about this mathematical formula, it's simply the hourly billable rate that you charge divided by the loaded cost on a per billed hour situation. So let me just walk through a calculation. That's a mouthful. So let's say we've got John. He's a consultant for us. And my charge out rate on an hourly basis for John is $125 per hour. His fully loaded cost, I've got to do this as a loaded cost basis of just salary and benefits, is $85,000 per year. But I've got to look to calculate this at how many hours he actually billed in the last 12 months. So he billed, in this example, 1,540 hours in the last year. So the way that I do that math, if I take that loaded cost for John and divide it by the hours that he delivered, I can arrive at his cost per utilized hour, $55.19. And then I take that number and I divide that by the $125 that we have, and I can see that my billable markup rate is 2.26. We've done a lot of modeling with this. We've partnered with many business process consultants that use this measure to understand what they're seeing. And when we go through and we pull apart the P&Ls of partners and we start to look at the individual resources and what their beamer is across each one, we can see that partners that have a beamer rate of about 1.7 or 1.8 are really struggling in terms of profitability. As you cross that threshold of about 2 is when you start to see positivity. You start to see the business becoming profitable. And the partners that are really successful are 2.5, 2.6. That's kind of the range that we tend to shoot for with them. And again, it's when they become specialized or when they have some sort of orientation that they can sell a premium for their value is when they become successful in that regard. The other thing that they do is to help drive down the cost pieces, they break up the activities in a very strategic, thoughtful way. The common mistake that I've seen partners make is they'll have what I call a superhero consultant that does everything, when in fact you should leave the hard stuff for that particular individual and let the junior resources take the more basic foundational things and let them run that particular piece of the business. So that's a great metric for project services firms. Now here's where it starts to get interesting in my mind. Remember, I said that the managed services for desktop and device management is tenfold what Office 365 is. And you start to see this become really impactful on net income as a result of this, right? So if I look at EMS, it's only $7.60 per user per month. And on average, we're seeing about $100 per user for the initial project services work. But even with that in a 50-user account, that's only going to account for $5,000. So even though you may get a little bit of cash up front, that's not where the money is. The money is in the $40 or $50 per user per month that you're monetizing over that 5-year window of time, and you can see the heavy contribution to that, and the impact is on gross margin. Remember, Office 365 delivered us a gross margin of 28%. This delivered us a margin of 41%. Much richer business, and a great next step once you have that customer in using Office 365. In terms of managed services, there are a number of metrics that we track. I didn't put the good, better, best up here because it really depends on what exactly you're doing within your managed service portfolio. But these are the ways I like to break down the measures whenever we're talking about this particular piece of the business. And I break them down into 3 buckets. The first is around how you're driving revenue in relation to this. And average revenue per customer is a big metric. What are you attaching to those and what are you charging for that? And then the other measure that goes with that is the frequency of it. So oftentimes when I look at a partner's business, I'll see the average attach rate for managed services in the range of 35 or 40%, right? So we've got to get much better at this. And you can solve this riddle by setting up your compensation plan in the right way. So for example, one of the things I always talk about with compensation is that you should look at some of the revenue lines that you have and charge a different rate for each one. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll recommend paying 2% of gross first-year revenue as a commission to your sellers for the product side. For project services, it's about 3%, but for managed services, you start to get into 4.5%, 5% in IP, 6, 7, maybe even 8%. I have to look at how rich the IP is for your business and what their quota is. But at the end of the day, you want to inspire them to drive that attach by paying them a higher commission rate. A lot of times I see partners just pay a flat commission rate. And the other mistake I see so often too is they don't pay enough on the leverage side. The base compensation is too high, right? I like a 60-40 split. I see a lot of 80-20 out there today. In terms of efficiency, I look for 2 things here. I look for average calls per customer as well as the case duration. What I'm looking for here are 2 things. I'm looking for, with calls per customer, do we need to do more training up front so they don't bother us as much, right? I like to think of managed services as an insurance policy, and in the first 6 months, I expect them to call me all the time, but after that, not so much, right? And then on the other piece around the case duration, this is the training internally. How long are these cases taking? Are my people that are doing these jobs, are they efficient enough at what they're doing, or do I need to train them on how to be better to close these cases faster? And then resourcing, right? This is all about utilization. If you have a bunch of people sitting idle, you don't need them, right? They're driving a cost to your business. If you're paying them loaded cost-wise, $50,000 or $55,000 a year, that's coming straight to the bottom line. You could take that off if you're not utilizing these people in the right way. And I like to shoot for a minimum of about 80%, right? Because they've got to do other things of documentation and things like that. Now, with that utilization piece, one little secret too from Palmetto is anytime that you have a billable or a managed service resource that's not busy, they're writing case studies and blogs and features and things that can go on that content website. They're contributors to the content that make your website really rich, and oftentimes they're the ones interfacing with your customers and can tell a really nice story about what you've actually done for them. So downtime equals give me some marketing content time. Okay. So let's talk about Azure here. Now Azure there are an infinite number of things you can do with Azure. But as you'll see on the next slide, one of the most common things that we see partners doing is the lift and shift of line of business apps into the cloud. And so in this example, what I did was I took a 3-tier architected HR solution, and we're going to lift and shift that into Azure and then add some storage to it. So I need 4 virtual machines to kind of run this scenario. And on average, what we see is about $150 per virtual machine per month is the going rate for managed services. It does fluctuate depending on the sophistication of what you're actually moving over. If you're moving a big, robust tool over, you may want to charge more for that. Or if you're going to do product support or those types of things, you can see that ramp up. But $150 is about the average rate that we see. And you can see how the revenue comes out here across these different revenue lines, right? If I'm doing $5,000 in project services up front to actually go from point A to point B, which is pretty common, about 5 days worth of work to get that set up and ready to go, and charging that $125 per VM per month, over a 5-year window of time, my gross revenue is $71,000. And because of the revenue mix between managed services and product, you're going to see about a gross margin, or you're going to see a gross margin in the range of about 35% on that particular piece. So here are the Azure scenarios that just came out of that survey work, the most common ones with those 1,200 partners. And so you can see here, this was for me an SMB very congruent to what I expected. A lot of activity around storage and backup, but I was happy to see as well the propensity of the cloud apps that are moving into our Azure environment as well today, because I think that that's going to be a much richer opportunity than something like storage, which tends to be a little bit more simplistic of setup in terms of revenue opportunity for our partners. All right, so let's talk about creating stickiness. Now, you've heard us talk about packaged IP. And that's another thing like Azure where it can mean a lot of different things. And many times when I chat with partners about packaged IP, they get hung up on thinking that it's this big monolithic application like a brand new ERP system or something they have to create that's huge. And that's not the case at all. I'll give you a couple of stories around packaged IP as examples. Power Objects, partner of the year multiple times for us in the CRM Online space. Great partner. They have created, probably more by now, my last count was 32-bit applications that extend the functionality of CRM Online. So these are things like connections into third-party mail platforms like MailChimp, or the ability for you to track a customer's behavior on your website on the opportunity record. And they charge about $1 per user per month for these things, right? These are not big, heavy applications that they're building, and instead they're creating a library slowly but surely through their development efforts and rolling those out globally and selling them. And I think there's a pretty heavy percentage of the revenue that's coming from that now. Now, another example of packaged IP that I just recently learned about, there's a firm in Colorado by the name of SSB. They're an Azure BI cloud analytics partner. And they have a couple of verticals, but the big one in their business is sports and entertainment. And one of their customers is highlighted this week, NASCAR. But they have a lot of NFL teams, NBA, University of Texas, so NCAA teams as well, college teams. And they started as a purely project services business 7 or 8 years ago. And they started to move into the recurring revenue stream by doing 2 things. One is their BI offering is now monetized as a managed service. You can get in contact with our data scientists and we'll provide that service to you so you don't have to hire it. It's a pretty expensive service. But what's even more intriguing to me is because they have that vertical orientation, they know the 8 to 10 systems that every sports team uses. Right? I actually did my internship in college with a hockey team, so I was in sponsorship sales, and so I know all these systems. It's really interesting to watch them bring them together because you have one in concessions, sponsorship sales, ticket sales, corporate, CRM. There's all these systems that are dispersed out there, and the data just is a mess when you try to bring it together. But what they did was they created an API that aggregates this data into a common data set. And they've actually built a provisional, or they've gone out and gotten a provisional patent on this particular API. And so that creates separation for them. And now that's their packaged IP, is this simple API that aggregates this data together. And no longer do they have to rely so much on human labor to mess with the data and make it make sense. They can do this through a technological method and really jump right into the more higher margin revenue streams of that managed service for them. So they got out of that particular piece of the business. And their growth now, compound annual growth rate over the last 3 years as a result of this is 70% for the business. Okay. That business process consulting piece, I talked about this before. I think this is where a lot of partners are starting to go that have built that knowledge around the vertical space. We're starting to see some of this stuff take hold, and I'm excited to see that. I think there's a lot of value out there, not just in coaching on the technology, but also on, especially in SMB, where when you go in and you meet with these customers, I would say that they could stand to gain a lot of benefit from understanding how to operate more efficiently. And in many cases, this was one of the key learnings for me when I was in SMB, if you have a packaged solution that solves 90% of their problems, because their business processes are so largely undefined, they'll adapt the business process in a lot of cases, unless it's truly core to their business. But a lot of times they'll adapt to those and actually find efficiency gains because what you built is built on industry best practices, right? So that dealer socket company as an example is perfect, right? You go into car dealerships and they all do things different ways. And they standardize their product, and they only have 1% of their revenue come from project services, because anything that they do that a customer wants as an enhancement, they don't charge the customer for it. They build it in the next quarterly release, and then everybody in the ecosystem benefits from it, so that everybody's on what is considered best of breed in the industry, right? That 1% does come from some of the nuance where the GM of the dealership is just adamant and obstinate about it and just has to have it. Okay. So here is the most common packaged IP scenarios around Office 365, and SharePoint easily takes the cake. And we're seeing great companies like Nintex and Live Tiles and Blue Rooster. By the way, Blue Rooster will partner with you, as any of these other ones will that I mentioned. Again, that's Nintex, Live Tiles out of New York, and Blue Rooster, so that you can go out and take their base layer applications and be able to build on top of them many different finished products. There's so many different workflows inside of these businesses that you can create packaged IP around. And one other thing that we used to do as well with the CRM product was we used to do what I called funded R&D. And so we'd write into our contract that no matter what we built, we retain the rights for, so that we could resell it over and over again. We never actually ran into a problem with customers with it. They were always fine with it. And that allowed us to, even though we were creating something that new, we had the rights to say, hey, if this is ever good enough to use with somebody else, we don't have to expend the cost from a services standpoint to get them to build that. We can actually just hand it over to them. We can monetize it in a different way, right? Very high margin piece of the business as a result. So packaged IP, I do see prices all over the place. In this particular example, I said they've got a packaged IP template. Blue Rooster charges $6 per user per month. I built $8 into this. I've seen as high as $20, $25, but kind of in that range of 6 to 10 is where I generally see. And what you'll notice here is this one is all your own money, right? This is no product, no Microsoft product, but this is all your own money. And because it's an insanely high margin business, you'll see that this is where you'll derive the greatest impact to your P&L in terms of gross margin. So $24,000 of revenue over those 5 years will net almost $16,000 for you, right? So packaged IP is eventually where I think most of our top performing partners are going to go. That's why I made the statement early on that I see ISVs as kind of the king of the cloud. Now here's kind of a synopsis of this over the 5-year period of time through the phases. I wanted to just show you a breakdown representation of revenue contribution by phase. So you can see that EMS will contribute the highest level of revenue through that. But what's more interesting is the revenue compared to the margin over that 5-year window of time. So even though that the product piece will contribute 30% of the revenue as an example, it will only contribute 16% of the margin in this particular customer example that I gave you. And you can see where managed services contributes 57% of the revenue, but 2/3 of the overall margin to the business, right? So you got to focus on those high margin revenue streams and cross-sell that multi-workload approach, right? Don't just be happy with Office 365. That's a conduit to so many other things, but that should be the great starting point. All right, so real quick in summary, for me, it's all about repeatability. It's all about efficiency. So think about how you're going to define the verticals or the areas of specialization that you have in your business. The next piece is, as we think about customer acquisition, think about how you can do this at significant scale. Have a very introspective look at your marketing. Are you investing an adequate amount? And are you investing in the right areas? And then from that point, make the decision, what should I insource versus outsource? Again, my personal preference, but you may feel differently, is I would outsource the technical piece around the SEO optimization, right? Because that skill set changes constantly, and there are firms that are absolutely outstanding at this. But the content piece, something that's more native to your DNA, that's core to your understanding, this is where I would maybe internalize this and do it yourself. As you think about average revenue per customer over time, make sure that you're building in those high margin revenue lines, selling the product. I say this to some of our LSPs in sessions I have with them. Having been a partner, the thing I never want to do is marry my success or failure to a vendor's margin and incentive rates. Right? We're using that to help you cover your cost of sale, but at the end of the day, you want to control your own destiny and make sure that you're layering on top everything that you can, and not only will that generate higher revenue and growth for you, but it will generate higher margin, as we've talked about throughout the day-to-day. And then something I shared with our internal teams about how we manage our own business, I like to use the term that execution without measurement is gambling. Right? So make sure that you have those KPIs that we've talked about today ingrained in your business, and that you're using them as instrumentation on a very regular basis. Because things like billable markup rate, if you fall behind on that, you can look at that a quarter later, and you can go from having a quarterly EBITDA rate of 10 points to 5 points almost overnight. So make very careful thought about how you use those metrics, because EBITDA will have an impact on that pretty significantly. Now, some resources for you guys to take a look at as you leave here. And sorry, the links are a little bit small. We have some things that we've announced this week that I think will be very beneficial for you. We've got the Partner Profitability Challenge. We actually built this internally for our own team so that they could become more educated on how partners operate and how to help you guys. But we've also now, as of yesterday, pushed this out and made it available to you. And we'll actually gamify this where you can earn points and have a little bit of fun with it along the way. We've got a destination on MPN, and we tried to build nice, easy vanity URLs for you. So that site on MPN is aka.ms/WAC Cloud Partner Profitability, if the font is a little bit small. That's where my team, we put all of our resources. I think the one that's even more impactful for you, though, is the fourth one up there, which is Cloud SureStep. We built this about 18 months ago and about 200,000 visits so far. But what's SureStep? Anybody familiar with SureStep before I go off? Okay, good. What do you think? Is it helpful? Yeah, pretty? We're always trying to make it better, so I'd love any feedback on it. I like that. We'll work on that. But with SureStep, for those of you that haven't seen it, what it does is it takes all of our best assets, everything from marketing materials, sales guidance, tools, and it puts them in a linear partner maturity model. So you have getting started assets, of the things you need at the core to get your business going. We have growing your business assets. So as you're kind of ramping up through your 4th, through your 25th deal, what do I need to really implement the right sales model, the right commission and compensation rate for my sellers? All the knowledge we've gathered is put into that. And then the top tier, what we call optimize your business. This is where we put the real forward-thinking assets, things like valuation calculators. So if you're thinking about M&A, if part of your growth strategy is to acquire a company, to merge with one, or maybe you're thinking about exiting and you need to understand what your company is worth, we've got a calculator and guidance that will help you with that. Those are the kind of tools that we're building into SureStep, as well as the marketing campaigns and product knowledge for you to take advantage of. All of that scenario modeling that I talked about, the survey work, we've taken that intelligence and put it into not only the types of slides that you see here, but we actually built a financial calculator that will show you what revenue streams partners are monetizing. I wish I should have put a slide there because I'm actually running faster than I thought I would. But it'll actually show you by scenario, and a scenario could mean sales automation in CRM or transform the data center in Azure. There are 20 scenarios. Inside of each one, there's an explanation of what the customers are looking for, the market opportunity, and the partner opportunity. And by partner opportunity, I mean through those 1,200 partners, this is what they told us that they were doing and monetizing. This is the dollar amount that they were charging for this. This is the cost basis of what they're seeing to deliver these resources. And the intent is to give you that insight so that you can play with this model and run what-if scenarios to see what the impact, if I add this to my business, will be on top-line revenue, the cost piece so you can get net income, and then we've also, through all the work that we've done with venture capitalists and investment banks on this M&A and valuation multiple issue, it'll show you what the impact to shareholder value will be over a 4-year window of time. So if you're thinking about long-term shareholder value, that's a great tool to use. And then marketing, because it's such a white-hot topic, we just did a bunch of work with IDC, and we've launched a new site, smartpartnermarketing.microsoft.com, for you to go out, grab all the best stuff that we have, and start to build your business. Start to build your marketing strategy. Now, here's for the rest of the week, what's going on. This afternoon, we've got a really interesting set of scenarios. We ran this on Sunday, and we saw much more demand than we thought that we would for this. We had room for 400 and 1,200 registered. We had to move it into a bigger room. That's a good problem to have. But what we have in there is first a panel. One of my team members, Jen Seeger, who leads our profitability work on my team, she will kick off and bring on Darren Bibby from IDC, Blue Blue Rooster in there? No, .NET Solutions, Perspicuity is in there. They're going to be talking about their secrets to success and what they've done in a main forum. And then once that ends, they break out into tracks. So we've got experts. Remember, I talked about Perspicuity's 18-year-old seller that does 60 deals a month, Charlie? Charlie's coming in today. He's doing the winning loads of cloud customers with Darren on the approach to going out and selling in the cloud. He's a fascinating young guy. I had him in a session with me a few years ago, and the picture that we had of him at 18 at the time, he's 20 now. At 18, he was shaking David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the UK's hand, and Steve Ballmer was standing next to him. I wish at 18 I'd had that much fun, right? But anyways, he'll be in there delivering a session today. We've brought in Harold Horgan from the York Group to talk about how to build packaged IP. We've got experts around managed services. Dana Wilmer from CloudSpeed will talk about how to build the financial model. He'll actually show you what I was talking about a few minutes ago. So if you have time, this is a great dedicated set of sessions that build on top of each other that start later on today at 1 o'clock. So I highly recommend doing that. And then tomorrow I've got another session if valuation is of interest to you. I've brought in a firm, an M&A firm called Revenue Rocket to help us to identify in the market what's happening in terms of valuation. He's got one of his clients, one of our partners in Telenet, who's recently done a merger. And then I'm bringing up ComparX and Cloud Bearing. Cloud Bearing is was one of the top performing partners in the U.S. and ComparX, a German-based LSP, came in and bought them to make their entrance into the U.S. market. And if you're not going through M&A, that doesn't mean it's not of value to you. And in terms of shareholder value is not relevant. There's a ton of activity right now of external funding coming into our channel. You read the press around firms like New Signature and Skykick. Skykick just secured $10 million more last week for a total of $17.2 million. New Signature secured $35 million. And there's much smaller investments of $500,000 to $1 million that's being made. In order for you to build your business case, you've got to understand how your business is valued. And we'll go through in detail exactly how that works in that session tomorrow afternoon at 2:30. And I'll be delivering that one. All right, so with that, I'm going to give a little bit of time. We have some mics. I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have. We've got 15 minutes left. I know it's early. Hopefully you've had your coffee. But I am happy to answer any questions related to this topic. And thank you for your time, by the way.
Just one question.
Sure.
So the bimmer rate that you've seen through all these different clients,
Yep.
do they tend to go up and down depending on the seniority of the resource?
Well, they do, and the reason that they go, and it's usually as they go up in seniority, the beamer comes down. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is they put that senior resource on the wrong type of activities, right? And the other reason, and they can't charge as much of a rate for them. The other reason that often happens is that individual does a lot of unbillable work, right? So every issue that comes up, they've got to go be the rescue resource to go fix that work. Those are the two viruses that exist inside of it. So they really try to protect that individual, and I really make sure that they focus on the things that they should be focused on as opposed to a lot of things that are maybe not as profitable for them to engage in. Yep. Sure.
Check. Okay. Do you and your team do periodic webinars along this line? And then where do I check to see as they're getting scheduled?
Sure. Great question. I should have mentioned it in that resource slide on that back couple of... that one. If you go to the profitability landing page, the aka.ms.cloudpartnerprofitability, we run them on Wednesdays. So we have what we call Cloud Partner Profitability Wednesdays. That's a mouthful. We should shorten the name. And we do that in 8-week increments. So we'll go for 8 weeks and we'll take a break for 2 or 3. And we bring in different experts. I'll do some sessions in there. We'll bring in folks like Dana Wilmer, who's doing the financial modeling this afternoon. And they give 30 to 40 minutes worth of content and then leave time for questions at the end. So Partner Profitability Wednesday is what we do on a regular basis. We do it twice on Wednesdays for time zone reasons. So we'll do it in the morning and we'll do it in the evening, Redmond time, to accommodate.
And are they recorded?
They are recorded, yes, and you can find them out on MPN. If you go and you search Profitability Wednesdays on MPN, you should be able to find them. My alias, by the way, is simple. It's my first initial and last name. It's BCOMBEST. So you can always email me if you get stuck and you can't find it. Or the easiest way to get me to where I'm pushing a lot of information all the time is through Twitter, and my handle is just @BrentCombest, BRENTCOMBEST. I try to push, and my team, Jen Seeger, we all push a bunch of stuff out that way. That way we can share it with you. Anything else, guys? Okay.
You talk.
Thank you.
Was that 7-8% of sales? You said a P&L, gross profits.
Build revenue. 7 or 8% of your build revenue should go back into marketing.
Build revenue
Yep.
as compared to product sales.
Top line revenue. Yep.
Top line revenue.
Yep.
Okay.
Of all aggregated revenue. Yep. So, all right, guys. Well, oh, you got one too? Okay. Sure, go for it.
So a lot of scenarios which you describe, like it's somewhat a mature practice, right? If you
Yeah.
are as a partner,
That's right.
like, what do you think about like growing partner, like a growing new practices? How do you incorporate? I know some like the billing rate ratio or
Yep.
commission ratio.
Yep.
It's good if my sales guy is doing like off the charts good.
Yeah.
So then he or she can take that and
Yep.
run with it. How do you incorporate those strategies in a new practice?
Sure. So whenever we're building new practices, what I've seen, when I said the good, the bad, and the ugly in the beginning, one of the ugly pieces that I've seen is partners trying to flip their business too fast. So one of the things that I often recommend is you should keep the current business you have in motion, and you should take the operating income to invest in the new one. And because you'll run, one of the biggest problems that partners like Perspicuity had in the BPOS days was they couldn't convince their sellers to sell the cloud, because if you're a seller like me, I want to sell what I'm comfortable with, and I've got a nice commission rate coming in. I don't want to do this. So they take that operating income to do two things. They start by hiring those younger, less expensive sellers to get the wheels going and defining their offering around managed services. And then they also are investing in the marketing infrastructure to get things going. And a lot of times that means a retainer with a technical marketer so that you can call them when you need your meta tags changed or you want to add some content to the site. And that's how they get things ignited. And they start simple by doing Office 365, mailbox migration, and then starting to do training and things like that on Office 365. And eventually SharePoint is the next logical step. Then you get into EMS with Azure Active Directory and those types of things. That's the general journey that we see. Yep. Yep. Okay. If there's nothing else, guys, thank you so much. Oh, we got one more.
Hey, Brett, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. In December, when we were in Redmond and we gave
Cloud Champs. Yep.
you had mentioned around just the value of some of your senior level management or senior level owners
Yep.
who are going to be transitioning out of the business and placing value and emphasis on it.
Yep.
One thing within our organization that you helped spark and helped us evaluate further is as those senior leaders were going to be transitioning out of the business, it was really important to capture what they were driving from a sales and revenue perspective. So when your question around what percentage of billable service revenue should go back into marketing, we found that it was really helpful after our conference call that we added not just the sales, or I'm sorry, just the marketing spend percentage, but also what the true spend of sales was having on us among our salespeople, and then a percentage of our CEO.
That's right.
Because the CEO was also driving, and it was really the aggregate of the two that was the important indicator of whether or not we were up or down for the future as we evolved our products and services, if we could sustain it. And it was a huge eye opener to us. Thank you again for all the help you helped our business with.
Sure.
But I wanted to just draw emphasis on that. I don't know if you had any other comment on that, the sales and marketing aspect, and then how ownership plays into it.
Yeah, it does. There's a couple things on that, and it's a great call out, because whenever you factor in or you try to calculate direct sales costs, a lot of times they will forget to put the owner's piece of that in there, and you have to do it to get the proper equation. I'm trying to keep it as clean as I can, just for example, but you are very right with that. But you're also kind of just starting to touch what I think is a bigger problem for a lot of our partners, and I'll talk a little bit about it in that session tomorrow. But as you think about the value of your company, shareholder value, if you were to decide to ever sell your business, if you're thinking about retiring or you're in this for an entrepreneurial kind of emotion, when a suitor comes in to look at your business, they're going to look at a lot of things, but one of the things they're going to really focus in on is, can this business continue to thrive without you? And if you are one of the primary sellers, or you're dealing with every single customer success or failure issue, or you're the one that's in charge of hiring and you're playing too many roles, you're really going to struggle in that environment. The saying that I heard yesterday is you should focus on the business, not in the business, once you get to a certain point. And because every time that you have a cash event, you're going to generally have an exit strategy with that. It may not be for 18 or 24 months, but if they come in and they see that, hey, you're everything to this business and it's going to implode on itself, your valuation multiple is going to go from 5 to 14 times EBITDA down to 1 or 2 points at most. It's going to be very painful. And then as you make yourself a little more obsolete and you implement the people and the processes underneath it, they have to be very strong. And they will interview your leaders as well. This was a problem for me in one of the companies I worked for in the channel. The VP of sales was the best friend of the owner. And as we went through an acquisition, they called that out, and it was really penalized as a result of it. Because we had an acquisition on the table, it failed, but long story short, it was called out. So those are the kind of things, to your point, that you've got to really think about as an owner. Yeah. Anything else? All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you investing the time.